Bill, I'm doing good. It's good to see you with your cougar. Is that a blanket or what is back there?
Oh, it's just a flag. Every 2 years, the Cougs come down to Arizona, so I have to fly the flag.
Good for you. Way to keep the faith.
Exactly. Exactly. I forgot you went to Wazoo.
Yes.
If I'd known that, I forgot that.
Well, that's how we first met. I vividly remember meeting Bill Boaz because I was a Vancouver, Portland kid, and I knew all the sportscasters. And I was at WSU, and I traveled with the baseball team to do play-by-play. And the Cougs were playing, I think, Portland State at like Walker Stadium. And Bill Boaz came up and said hi to the crew. I went to Washington State. I just wanted to introduce myself, and that was my first Bill Boaz interaction.
Wow. Good memories. See, I'm so much older, I forget things, lots of things.
No, I just thought it was cool that a local sportscaster would come up and say hi to the student radio crew for the visiting team, but we had the WSU connection, so that was really nice of you.
That's cool. Yeah, that's a good story. I don't know how I went all these years without knowing or remembering.
So, what was your how did you get to WSU? I forgot where you're from originally.
Lake Oswego.
Oh, okay.
And I came out of high school and went to Oregon State initially because I was always a Beaver. And I started out majoring in architecture, which would have been a better choice for Eugene, but I was a Beaver. So I fumbled about there for a while, and I got more training in architecture and drafting and stuff at Lake Oswego than I did in Corvallis. So I quit that and took a business major for a short period. And then people kept telling me, "You sound like you ought to be on the radio." I'm going, well, maybe I should do that. So I contacted Jimmy Jones in town and said, okay, if I want to pursue the radio or TV, where do you suggest I go? And he said, in the West, there's two schools. You go to UCLA or Washington State. I couldn't envision spending any serious time in LA. So Washington State it was. So I moved up there in 74 in time for the World's Fair.
In Spokane.
And spent a year getting residencies. That's so I could pay in-state tuition down in Pullman. Entered school in 1975 and finished up in 77. And away we go.
So let's go back to the fact that you were a youth with not a true direction because you were letting other people decide whether you're going to be architecture, business, or broadcasting.
Most 20-year-olds don't know what they're doing. Most 60-year-olds don't know what they're doing. You just kind of go with the flow and see where you land.
Well, you landed in the right place. What kind of stuff did you do at Washington State? Because I mean, that was the attraction for any of us going into broadcasting. Is it was a good school and there were a lot of opportunities to actually get on the air.
Yeah. I did a lot of that. I hosted the sports final show on the radio for I think two years, 15-minute sports show every night. Did a lot of play-by-play. Traveled with the Cougs on their spring training or on their spring break road trip in 76 and 77. Phoenix one year for a tournament there in the Riverside. The Best in the West tournament was in Tempe, and then the Riverside tournament. And did Pullman Greyhound basketball and
yes,
Greyhound football and all that. One year that it's like the Class B high school basketball state championship was being played in Pullman at the Coliseum. So I'm going, and a couple of the teams, many of the teams are like in the Spokane area. So I called one of the program directors up in Spokane with one of the little 500-watt radio stations and said, I'll give you the game, if you'll, pay for the lines and all that kind of stuff. Like I think I even said, I think pay me $100 and I'll So we hooked up and I did a couple, 2-3 ball games that were carried up in Spokane and all that. That was kind of fun. So yeah, I did a lot of play-by-play in college. And by the time you get to Portland, you're not doing play-by-play anymore. You're doing 5-minute, 6-minute, 8-minute news clips.
That's interesting because our experiences at WSU were real similar. I did almost all the same things that you did just about 4 or 5 years after you were there. So that was a
Okay.
great training ground, wasn't it?
What years were you there?
I got there in '79 and I left in '83, and that's when I had landed at KGW.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I started in 75, got out of there in 77. So, wow, interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, I lucked into the internship at KGW, which was the summer before in '82, just because a student ahead of me had done it and they were looking for another guy the next summer. And I came down and, lived at home and worked 6 or 7 days a week in the summertime, just enjoying the heck out of it.
Okay. Yeah, I did my internship up at the KHQ in Spokane.
Hmm. And was that your first job then out of college? Did you go to Spokane?
First job out of college, I got the resumes out, dropped off the audition tapes. I had two offers. I had an offer in Yakima and had an offer in Missoula, Montana. And the Yakima job actually paid $50 a month more. But from a sports standpoint, there's not much going on in Yakima. Missoula had the University of Montana.
Right.
So I counter offered them and got them to pay me an extra $50 a month more than Yakima offered and spent a year up there, which is great. They did more play-by-play. I did the Montana State football game statewide. Every city in the state carried it. And in the Big Sky Conference basketball tournament, I did play-by-play on that as well, which was fun because that was the time when Montana had Michael Ray Richardson.
Yes.
Who was a big deal then and a first-round draft pick in the NBA by the Knicks. So I knew him and knew his story, and it was kind of fun to watch him grow.
Yeah, those sports experience, on the job, on air opportunities were really important back then. If you wanted to spread your wings and get into the sports department, so Missoula was a pretty good choice.
Yeah, it was a good choice. I spent 15 months there, which is about enough. And you do it all. I mean, you're out there, doing your reporting, and you're out there shooting film, and you're editing film, and all that. We had myself. We had a news director. We had a news anchor, and we had a news producer. And I think that was the entire show. So it's the start. And it was interesting. I think it was one weekend a month. I had to come in on Sundays and do news.
Ah.
I was the only one. So I had to come in and I would, cut and tape and do no teleprompters back then, of course. But I would tear off the wire all the news stories and do a segment and send it to commercial break, go out and readjust the camera, go over and do the weather after the commercial break, go back to commercial, move the camera, come back, do sports, adjust the camera, come back, do you're doing the whole thing when you go home.
That is the epitome of one-man band.
That's what it was. Exactly what it was.
Who else? Casey Cowan, my good friend who worked at KGW, was a Missoula kid too, out of Oregon State. She was probably a little bit after you before she got to Missoula before she went to Portland.
Okay. Yeah, I came out with Tracy Berry, and she went to Twin Falls.
Yeah.
And I was in Missoula, so we were kind of in the same time zone. So we'd talk to each other from time to time and compare notes, see how things are going. And that was good to see her move on to Portland. She was there forever. Is she still there, or she retired now?
Tracy retired, I think, about 2 years ago.
Okay. Do you see her any?
Last time I saw her was at a memorial service for a coworker. It's been a while because I'm now in Central Oregon, and so I'm a ways away from all the events with all of our news friends retiring.
Where are you in CO?
Black Butte Ranch.
Okay. And we came back up to Oregon in 2012 and spent 5 years in Eagle Crest.
Yeah, but you said you couldn't handle the winters.
Well, the first 4 winters were fine.
Yeah.
They were as advertised. The golf course is open year round. The snow comes to be gone by noon. Sure. Then 16 happened, 2016. And it wasn't good. I was having some health issues. And just the idea of going out and shoveling 3 feet of snow when 18 degrees didn't appeal to me.
Yeah, 2016 was the record snow year. I remember that. We weren't living here at that point, but we had to come up and shovel a lot of snow.
Yeah.
Back to Missoula, you mentioned you were shooting on film, not videotape. You got the end of the film days, is that right?
We had film when we got to KATU.
Wow.
We transitioned into videotape midway through the tenure there. Yeah, it was all film, and there was a company in the middle of Missoula that would process it So you had to have your film in by 2 o'clock or whatever, so you'd have it back by 3 o'clock, so you could cut and slice and paste and put together a news story. But yeah, it was all film then, and many of the cameras didn't even have sound; they were just little handheld, film cameras.
Yeah, the deadline on film was a lot different than it is today with even as they've gone past I was there as they went to chips on cameras instead of videotape. So that changed the world as well.
Whole new world. Yeah, I had no experience with that.
So you landed at KATU in the sports department. Was that with Steve Arena, right?
Yep.
And I know when I got there, it was Steve Arena, Bill Boaz, and a young kid named Steve Wick. That was the sports crew at K2. Is that right?
Steve Wick, we knew him as the I-man. He was the intern. And I think he might have gotten a full-time gig afterwards. I don't recall, but yeah, he was the intern for most of the time I was there. And there was a guy named Al Wynn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought at one point, because I know Steve did get full-time there, Steve Wick. At one time, I thought you had 4 guys in a sports department, which is unheard of these days.
Yeah. Yeah. In the old days, I mean, again, when I anchored the weekends, and you do an hour-long newscast, and there's not an hour of news on the weekends, but there's a lot of sports. So they give me 12 minutes.
I know. Wasn't that amazing?
So you're rehashing what happened yesterday and re-editing the tape from last night's big game and bringing in the new stuff of today. And there was really no ESPN then. So if anybody's looking for ball scores, you're the resource. So I go through the entire National League schedule, the American League schedule, and here's what happened in the big leagues today. You're the source. But anymore, it's changed so much.
Yeah, people that are sports fans now don't understand. Now you can. ESPN has everything, and then you can look it up on your phone. But back then, if you wanted to know how your team did, if you were a Dodger fan, you had to wait till 11 o'clock at night to see the score come up because because otherwise you had to wait for the newspaper the next morning. It was not immediate.
If you blinked and missed the score, you couldn't rewind the tape.
That's true, right? They had no VCR or DVR to go backwards.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, I remember those days. Cause I think the standard time for sports on a weekend was like 6 minutes, and sometimes if you had a lot of stuff, they'd let you go 8.
Yeah. Well, I went longer than that a lot of times. I had a lot of flexibility because I kind of enjoy doing the feature stuff.
Right.
So I would do an individual news story ran 3 or 4 minutes, but it was more of an in-depth 60 minutes type of piece, and then backfill with all the other stuff. But yeah, anymore, I mean, we get news now out of Phoenix, and like they get a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and they're done.
Oh yeah, and the sports staffs are maybe 2 people.
Yeah.
So what? Give me your perspective on sports then and now. I mean, I never watched the NBA now. I can't stand watching it. I'm not much of a Blazers fan, but back then when we were all covering sports in the early 80s, we'd go to 35 or 40 Blazer games a year. It really has, it seems so much more innocent then.
Yeah, I think it was so much more innocent then. And I got into this gig too, partly because I was a sports fan, but I'm not an athlete. So if I'm going to stay close to sports at all, this is a good way to do it. And yeah, I can go to 35, 40 Blazer games a year too. And, either sit up at midcourt or sit down on the baseline or whatever and shoot the game and go back. And it's interesting because, after every game, you get to go in the locker room and talk to the players. And I'm in there and you're in there, the whole media's in there, the players are in there. And you're going, what can I ask that hasn't been asked before?
Good luck.
What response can I get that hasn't been given before? What soundbite can I acquire that will play well at 11-17? And it's difficult. Before your time there, the Blazers had a player named Ron Brewer. You remember Ron?
Yep.
One of the triplets out of Arkansas. Great guy, good player. But no matter what you asked him, his answer was the same. Team ball. Did Ron get great game tonight? He scored 37 points, 9 assists, 5 rebounds. You really had it going. Tell me. Team ball. We played team ball. They got me the ball, made a shot, team ball.
Then there was the great Clyde Drexler, who you'd say something, you go, no doubt about it.
He was behind me. I was Michael Thompson, and I was there for Billy Ray Bates and all that. Yeah, Clyde came after me. But I always thought about, I want to get in there someday and ask the question, say, Ron, how would you solve the Mideast crisis?
Team ball.
T-ball.
Yeah, those innocent is a good way to say that because we did go into the locker room, we did have discussions, almost had we had relationships with those players because we were with them all the time. Nowadays they're just on a they're on a podium in front of a sponsored background doing a press conference, and that intimacy of going in there and interviewing them after the game, which is I felt that was a privilege, but it was just kind of common practice back then. And that doesn't happen very much anymore. Now it's all
I wasn't even
produced.
clear if that happens or not. I mean, I don't watch much anymore either. I see the clips up in the local newscast, and they're in a media room being interviewed versus one-on-one. And I don't know if that was COVID related or something else. But we used to be the first person you talk to after the game is Jack Ramsey. And Jack's here and I'm there and I hold the microphone up and Jack's giving his view of the game. But
remember how small that room was? It was tiny, and there were 4 TV cameras and 4 reporters with microphones and radio guys and print guys all crammed in there, and it was hot. And back then, at least when I was doing it, the Blazers were average to Midland. They were not. It was not the '77 championship Blazers, and so there wasn't a lot of good stuff to talk about in that hot, steamy, claustrophobic room.
It smelled like a locker room.
Yeah.
And what's even worse than a Trailblazer locker room is a Winterhawk locker room.
Oh, I was exactly. There is
nothing smells worse.
Exactly. If you haven't been in a hockey locker room, you haven't been in the most odoriferous setting there is in sports. That's because of that. That's because all the sweat against the leather in those in that equipment, man.
So like, Jim Dobson. Talk to me.
So true. The other thing, so you left sports about 84, 85 or so?
82.
Oh, you're pretty quick. Then, because I did my internship in 82 and then was in 83, is college football was not a big thing, especially in Oregon during that time, because neither of the schools were very good. And many of the games were not on television. I mean, because, we used to drive down to Corvallis or Eugene and we'd feed half the game back up for the highlights at the 5 o'clock news. And there were not a lot of wins. And by the time I got out of sports in 1989, Oregon had just made a bowl game for the first time in 20 some years, and things started to perk up. So college football got a lot bigger after we were out of sports.
Yeah, we didn't even have the privilege of what you're talking about. When I was doing it, we wouldn't cover the games because, they were bad and we didn't have the resources. But we wouldn't even send the crew down to Corvallis or Eugene. We'd hire a stringer.
Oh, yeah, right.
Tell them to shoot 200 feet of film. And then we get the film back the next day. And you try to go through and see if there's any plays you can, incorporate and then write your script to and go from there. And that's, there was one game, the play of the game was a 65-yard run down the right sideline, but the guy shooting the film was rack focusing and it went all blurry. So I had to write the script that running back breaks loose, runs down the sideline, runs out of focus at the 12-yard line.
He was so fast, he was out of focus. I remember it happened, I think the year before I got to KGW was so you would have been there at KATU, was the Neil Lomax 100-point football game.
Yeah.
And Scott Lynn telling me the story that, because of everything that was going on, they couldn't get a camera there. And all they got a camera there for was the picture of the scoreboard at the end. They didn't get any touchdowns.
Highlights galore. Do 20 minutes of sports that night.
Yeah. So were you at K2 for the '77 Blazers, or was that just before you got there?
It was before I got there. Many of the players are still there,
right.
But I got there in time for the '78 season.
I
And
see.
my first exposure, they were practicing that out at in Gresham, Base Mountain Community College. So I walked in the gym one day and had introduced myself to Jack and the gang. And yeah, it was, and Walton wasn't there at the time because he was hurt. And it was kind of, yeah, he was kind of down in the Blazer organization, as I recall. But I met Bill a year or so later. He came through town for some event or another. He was at the Marriott Hotel and got to yak at him. But yeah, no, who was there? Twardzik was still there. Larry Steele was still there. Michael Thompson was just coming on board. Jim Paxson was a year away. Bobby Gross was still there.
Right.
Yeah.
One of my first Blazer assignments was, so I was still in high school in '77 when they won the title. And of course, we were all Blazers fans then. One of my first assignments was to go to a practice where the Clippers, they were then the San Diego Clippers, they were going to be playing in town, and Bill Walton had joined them. It was going to be his first game back after leaving Portland.
Okay.
So, I mean, imagine my, having been a 77 Blazers fan, then, hey, go interview Bill Walton coming back to town. I was out of my element a little bit.
I'm so proud of how well Bill has done, given the speech impediment he had when he was younger. I mean, he could barely get out of a sentence. And now, I mean, people either love him or hate him, probably up there as well as down here, because he does tend to pontificate. But he's done a great job from public speaking and from a color analyst standpoint, and nobody would have guessed that 40 years ago.
Yeah, he was very anti-media because of his speech impediment and his shyness.
Yeah.
When he was in the NBA, but he got over that, and I think he learned that he had a public persona value, and has really marketed and I don't want just used that to get a real strong career as an analyst. I mean, I don't think he knows basketball as well as many analysts, but he sure is entertaining if that's your thing.
But he knows basketball better than you do and better than I do. That's probably the important thing.
Yeah. He also knows knee surgery better than us.
Oh, yes. He knows the knife.
So sports couldn't keep you, but you stayed around in Portland. Didn't you go into finance?
Went into finance, and let me back up a notch. I'm assuming we're recording this right now. We're doing the show. Is that right, Carl?
Oh, heck yeah.
We're doing the show.
We've been recording since point one, Bill, since you said hello.
I was afraid of that. I better straighten up. Okay. No, yeah, I got to Portland in '78 and got fired in '82.
Oh, I didn't know you got fired.
Got fired in '82.
What'd you do to get fired, Bill? Just be good?
Well, the story at the time was, well, we had a consultant come through, and they decided to change things up. It didn't ring right then, and it doesn't ring right today. What happened, I think, I got fired for saying no to the sales manager.
Oh, interesting.
Because back at the time, KATU was doing, well, the International Motorsports Association, the auto races were coming through PIR once a year.
Yeah.
They would race into July, early August. And KATU would do a nightly special after the news, 15 minutes, maybe 30 minutes of highlights of the day, qualifying, feature stories, what have you. Well, the sales manager called me in leading into this saying, I want you to do the voiceover of the intro to the show. That this is the G.I. Joe's 200. Brought to you by G.I. Joe's. And I'm going, I'm not sure I feel comfortable with that. Well, why not? Well, I'm a journalist. I shouldn't be getting into marketing and that kind of thing. We have a voiceover guy.
Right, in the studio there.
Yeah, have him do it. No, I want you to do it. I don't feel comfortable with that. I really like you to do it. No, no. A month later, I was gone.
Huh.
So I'm certain that it was that. I said no to the guy that wanted me to say yes. And what's funny is years later, okay, you went to Wazoo. They do the Myrtle Symposium every year and honor somebody in the business. And going back, I think it was 2014 or so, they had Ted Koppel. They were honoring Ted. I went up to hear Ted, and after his talk, there were about 10 of us that were invited to go out and have dinner with Ted. And it turns out I was sitting right next. I had Ted Koppel on my shoulder for 90 minutes. So I'm telling this story to Ted, and he looks at me and goes, "You're an idiot." What? You're an idiot. Going way back to the beginning of TV, back in the 50s, the anchor man in the evening would say, "This is the nightly news brought to you by Chesterfield cigarettes." You're an idiot. So, okay, Ted, thanks.
Well,
But maybe I was.
what Ted says counts. I'm sorry, Bill.
Yeah, I guess.
No, I admire your journalistic stance there. You needed some support from a news director to say, I don't want my news people doing that kind of stuff. I remember a few things similar like that where people wanted some news voices on those kind of things, and they drew the line, and they had support from management. I mean, your argument makes sense. You got plenty of people here to voice it. You don't need me, and
Right.
I should not be devaluing my integrity by jumping on the GI Joe's bandwagon there. I mean, you're going to say it on the air when you go, here are the highlights from the GI Joe's 200, because that's the name of the race, but you don't have to go that far overboard.
Yeah, I agree. And I would try to work around too, and maybe not even, if I could avoid it, not even call it the GI Joe's 200. Just the IMSA races are in town this weekend, and this is race, whatever. Is the Rose Bowl called the Rose Bowl anymore, or is it the Rose Bowl as presented by AT&T?
Oh boy, it probably has another sponsor on it too. It's probably the FedEx Rose Bowl brought to you by AT&T.
Exactly. Do you do that and get involved? Is the PGA playing at Pebble Beach this week, or are they playing
AT&T program?
Exactly. Whatever. At what point do you say that's not my job?
Well, what's the Rose Garden called now? It's the Moda Center?
It's the Motor Center.
Yeah. Or I just went to a baseball game up in Seattle, and for me, it's always been Safeco Field, but now it's T-Mobile Park.
Exactly. Well, down here where the Diamondbacks play for years was called the Bob Bank One Ballpark.
Right.
And then it changed many years ago to Chase Field or Chase Bank. And I missed the memo. And they were having a baseball, like a spring training international tournament there back in 2006 or something. And I looked it up online, where are they playing the games? And they're playing the games at Chase Field. I'm like, oh, that's a new venue. Where is that? So I had to look, whoa, that's the Bob. Okay, well, I know where that is. I can find that place. But I had no idea where they were playing the games.
Well, thinking about it, is Autzen Stadium maybe one of the few stadiums around that doesn't have a sponsor? Because Research Stadium changed at Oregon State, and I know I think there's a sponsor on Husky Stadium, might be First Bank of something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Autzen Stadium is maybe the only one that I can think of that doesn't have a sponsor yet.
Well, why isn't that Nike Stadium?
Well, it is.
It is, sure it is. Why isn't it?
So you and I both have Tommy Lasorda stories.
Yes.
So why don't you go first with your Tommy Lasorda story? And if mine's not any good compared to yours, we'll just throw it out.
Well, my story starts back in 1976. I was still in school at Wazoo. And I was with the baseball team doing play-by-play, and we were down in Southern California. And the finale down there, Bobo Brayton, the coach, took us to Dodger Stadium to see the final spring training game of the season. The Dodgers are playing probably the Angels. And we got to go down in the clubhouse and briefly met Tommy. And at the end, Tommy, one of the obligatory, if you ever need anything, be sure to give me a call kind of things. Fast forward 13 months, I'm now in Missoula, Montana. And NBC is having a junket down to LA to promote their fall season. And management up in Missoula wanted to send me down, not for the 14 celebrity interviews that they couldn't care less about, but for the 10-second bumper snippet saying, be sure to watch my new show this Friday on KGBO. That's what they were after.
Right.
I'm going, okay, I'd be happy. This would be fun. But what's going on down there sports-wise this weekend, or that weekend? So there's no Google then, but I did my research and found, the Dodgers are home playing, and they're playing Cincinnati. I wonder if I can get a press pass and get in to see this thing. So I called the Dodgers and said, I'd like to get a message to Tommy Lasorda. And the gal goes, hang on just a minute, let me switch you. So the phone switches, rings. Hi, this is Tommy. He answers his own phone. So I was impressed by that, explained the situation. He sent me out a press pass. I got there on that day. Got to go down into the clubhouse, go out on the field. I got there early and stood next to the batting cage as they took batting practice. It was against the Big Red Machine. Cincinnati was in town, and it was the nationally broadcast game of the week. Joe Garagiola, Tony Kubek were up in the booth, and I'm standing out there next to the batting cage watching George Foster and Dave Concepcion and Joe Morgan.
Tony Perez.
I grabbed Pete Rose and did a nice interview with him. Again, audio only. I didn't have a camera with me, so it was just an audio. I had to do slides with when I got back, and then spent the next 2.5 hours in the camera stall next to the Dodger dugout, watching the game from that viewpoint. The game ended. The Dodgers blew it in the 9th inning, a missed play out in right field. We all go into the clubhouse, into Tommy's office. I'm there. The local media is there. The national media is there, busy. Tommy's in a foul mood. They blew the game. So I just kind of quietly sat back on my heels waiting, and one by one, everybody left and then it was just me and Tommy at the end. And I want to talk about something that can relate to maybe people in Missoula, minor league baseball. I came up through the minors. So I want to talk about Class A ball and Double A ball and how to get to Triple A ball in the major leagues. And he was terrific. He took his time with me. He was patient with me. He answered all of my questions. I became a big Tommy Lasorda fan that day.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a nice guy. I interacted with him just a couple times, but I got to introduce him at a fundraising banquet in Vancouver for their American Legion baseball team. One of the guys highly involved with it was a scout for the Dodgers who lived in Vancouver, and he knew Tommy. He got Tommy to come up and be the guest speaker at this banquet, and I was the host and got to introduce him, which was really cool. And I remember as a kid, probably early 70s, 73 or 4, when Walter Alston was still the manager and Tommy was the third base coach. Yeah. NBC put a mic on Tommy at the third base coach's box, which, was gold. It's, everything coming out of there was going to be comedy. Yeah. And I remember Pete Rose was playing third base for the Reds and Tommy was there coaching third. And he was, bickering and bantering at Pete the whole time. And he goes, "Hey, Pete, our team voted and you were the second best looking player on your team." And Pete kind of looks over and goes, "Yeah." And he goes, and then Tommy goes, "The other 24 guys tied for first." And I told that story, and I've stolen that joke a million times, but I got to tell it again, and he remembered the event and thanked me for remembering it, and called me by name and all that kind of stuff. And of course he was a great speaker at any kind of banquet. So Tommy Lasorda was a great guy.
Outstanding, good story.
Did you see just this week the Portland Winterhawks have changed their logo?
I did see a blurb. They're getting rid of the Blackhawk.
They're getting rid of the Native American insignia and logo, and they're replacing it with a red-tailed hawk. Okay. So they're still going to be the Winterhawks. They're going to be a bird of prey instead of a Native American. So that's a interesting step forward for the Winterhawks. It's been 40 some years.
Yeah, and I remember way back when they first started, it was a big deal to be able to get these used uniforms out of Chicago, at least the black hockey players, whether they were or were not. But the fact they're still playing the game with those uniforms, that's interesting.
And you covered the Winterhawks a lot, and I knew going in that KATU had a little bit better of a connection with the Winterhawks. I know you guys covered them. Steve Arena liked them a lot. And how often did you travel with them on the road? Because that was never easy.
Well, no, and I was a hockey fan going way back. As a kid growing up in Portland, I used to listen to the Portland Buckaroos back in the early 60s. Bill Anderson on the play-by-play, Harry Glickman in the locker room doing the post-game interviews. And I didn't see a game for like 3 years, so it was all just the visuals in my head. And I was really wanting to know, what does a sin bin look like? It was a few years later before I found out it's a penalty box. But yeah, I got to Portland and I thought the Winterhawks were being undercovered. I mean, I thought it was a good story, a good team, a good representation of the city, and they weren't being covered well by anybody then. So I started covering it because of my interest in hockey, and we traveled with them certainly to Seattle for big games or Victoria for big games. Once I joined them on a bus trip because they do all their traveling by bus. I mean, you know, it's a big league, and they're not taking charter flights. So we flew up and met them in Lethbridge, Alberta, and stayed on a bus with them from Lethbridge to Saskatoon to Regina to Spokane and back home. So we were on the bus for like 5 or 6 days. They're on the bus for 2 weeks. But they're a bunch of, you know, 17, 18, 19-year-old kids, so they handle it pretty well. I remember a writer for the Oregonian, Pete Sage, was sitting across to me. He was reading the book, The Boys on the Bus. And it was a political book, not a hockey book, but I thought it was apropos given what we were doing. But a couple of memories I got on travels was when they got into playoffs, and it was bigger time travel, and they were flying. They had a playoff. The winner goes to Memorial Cup back, I think, 1979, give or take, and they were playing Brandon, Manitoba. So we're going to go cover that on film and get the film back so it can be shown the next day. And we're trying to do all the logistics of this and trying to figure everything out. So we flew into Winnipeg, rented a car, got to Brandon, did the game, did the package, and now we're going to drive to Minot, North Dakota to put the film on an airplane. We don't trust this getting through customs on its own. So we had everything figured out except one thing. We got to the US border at about 1 o'clock in the morning, and we didn't realize that the US closed. They weren't open for business. So we stopped and we're looking around. The station spent a lot of money getting us out here and putting us up, and they've got an investment. We can't just, so what are we going to do? We got to break in. So I got out of the car and walked. It was like just a little toll booth, all it was, and there was a pylon. So I got out and moved the pylon. We drove through. I put the pylon back. Off to Minot we go. I learned later it's called felonious entry.
Yeah, there's probably a warrant still out for your arrest in Minot, North Dakota.
On our way back home, it's like a 3-hour drive to Minot. So we're going to 3 hours down, 3 hours back, and get some shut-eye. On the way back, we stopped at that booth and explained our situation. And they agreed to stay open that next night after the next game. So we were good. But that first night, we were really shaking our heads going, how do we handle this? We don't want to go to federal prison for this. We got to get the film back to Portland.
I traveled with the Winterhawks once just to get to do a series of what it's like for those guys on the road.
Yep.
And they played a game at the Coliseum. We hopped on the bus with them. They were going to Kamloops, and those kids they were sleeping in the upper luggage racks and in the aisles. And I mean because they didn't get into Kamloops till like 9 the next morning, and they were playing a game that night.
Yep.
And then we followed them to New West outside of Vancouver for another game. So we did 3 or 4 stories on just what it's like to travel like that in those buses. That was roughing it really for, of course, that's pretty much junior hockey.
That's junior hockey. It's roughing it for you.
Yeah, it was.
Roughing it for me. Yeah, another time we traveled big was they were in Memorial Cup back in Hull, Quebec, which is a 2-hour drive out of Montreal. And we had video at that time, so we were able to put the stories together at a local station and satellite them back. But the final night, the game finished late. We did our job there. We satellited it back. Now we got to drive back to Montreal to catch a flight early the next morning. And it's about a 2-hour drive, and I drove about an hour, and I was just bushed and tired. And the cameraman, Phil Beard, you probably know Phil.
I love Phil.
He took over, started driving, and I'm sleeping, and suddenly, boom.
Deer?
I look up, and we've had an accident. Phil fell asleep as well. We're up against a stump.
Oh, no.
And you can see the airport. The airport's like right there. We're close. So we're looking, can we get the car going here? Can we back it up, push it away? What do we do? You know, the car's, it's not drivable. So we hail a taxi. We unload all of our stuff, the camera, the tripods, all that stuff, load the back of the taxi, go up to the airport, get checked in. I go down to the rental car counter to explain the flight. They're not open yet. So I had to write them a note that you can find your car at the corner of, what was this, 18th Street and Buren. It all worked out, but and we lived through it. But man, it was some exciting times.
And I'd like to prorate or proactively get the insurance that we didn't sign for when we rented the car.
Exactly.
I had a road trip with the Blazers once. It wasn't like a playoff road trip, but same kind of deal. We traveled with them for about 3 games on the road just to say what life was like on the road in the NBA.
Yeah.
Much different than junior hockey, obviously. But so we were in Indianapolis, and I think we got to Cleveland, and we were riding on the team bus with them. And we got on the team bus to go from the hotel to the arena, which was like 30 or 40 minutes outside. It was in like Richmond, something.
Yeah.
It wasn't downtown Cleveland anymore. But
Right.
so we get on the bus, and we got our camera, and we're rolling. I mean, the bus leaves. We have no option. And Jack Ramsey stands up and turns to somebody, goes, "Where's Darnell?"
Valentine.
And Jack goes, "Darnell's been traded." And so we're driving these 45 minutes to this Blazer game, which at this point is now insignificant because there's been a major trade. And no cell phones back then. This was, yeah. So we got off the bus at the stadium. I got to a payphone. I called back to the station. We got a cab. I called back to the hotel. I got Darnell, who's still there. Says, "Darnell, you're still there. When are you flying out?" "Tomorrow morning." "I'm coming back to interview you." We got on a cab. We drove back to the hotel. We interviewed Darnell, after he's been traded, which, I mean, this is the biggest story of sports right now. And we've got it because we're in Cleveland and nobody else does. And so we totally missed the entire game. Again, insignificant, but then we've got to get to the NBC affiliate in Cleveland to feed this interview back to Portland.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the 3-hour East Coast time zone working to our advantage.
Mm-hmm.
It's now like 11:30 or 11:45 at night, and we're banging on the door and calling every number to get somebody in master control. We've got the satellite time already hooked up, and they didn't care. The night shift master control guy doesn't care that I've got the lead story in Portland.
No.
And we had to make a whole bunch of different phone calls to get that door open. Then we run in and put the tape in the machine and satellite back to Portland, and got the story on the air. Total luck.
Yeah.
But man, was I shaken. We were in Cleveland, and we had all these things had to go right to get the story right and to get it back. I didn't have to break into the United States with felonious entry, but I almost had to break into the NBC affiliate in Cleveland.
Nice scoop.
Only by luck.
Yeah.
Only by luck.
Yeah.
Okay, so Bill, any other things we missed that I don't want to come back another time, partner? Oh,
No.
yeah. Tell me about your wedding.
What do you want to know about my wedding?
You said it was a surprise.
It was. I moved to Seattle back in '85, and met Linnea. She was a gatekeeper at a brokerage firm I worked with. So we had a professional relationship for a couple, 2-3 years. Then we discovered we liked each other and started dating, and then it got more serious. And then we were back and forth on how serious are we getting or are we not getting, and back and forth and back and forth. And the catalyst finally was I had a whole bunch of frequent flyer miles that were going to expire. So we booked a trip to Hawaii to go enjoy Hawaii and use up the miles. And I figured now might be a good time to do this. So I had a broker friend of mine down in Sacramento videotape me out in his courtyard proposing. And I had Hawaiian Airlines rented on their movie screen.
Oh,
flying over. So, we're 20,000 feet and climbing over the Pacific, and suddenly, boom, here we go. They'd upgraded us to first class, so that was nice. So we're in a good spot. And the article in the magazine that month was about Hawaiian weddings. So, she was all excited anyway. But this was on a Saturday. We got married Monday night on the beach, Lumahai Beach on Kauai as the sun set. And it's been 31 years, and we're still married.
You romantic sports reporter, stockbroker, you.
Well, not as romantic as you might think. I got it out of my system in that one weekend. I'm not sure I've been romantic since, but that one weekend I had it going.
Good. Well, I'm glad we got that part of Bill Boaz into this podcast. So that you're more than just a sports guy. So, so you were unceremoniously let go at KATU. Had you had your fill of sports, or did you want more out of it?
I was getting close. I mean, as you know, the hours are relentless. Now, my typical day was 10 a.m. till 11:30.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it's a lot of hours. Uh, so the joy of sport was leading me to a degree. I got into it because I enjoyed sports, and a lot of it was just same old, same old. I did a little bit of work at KPTV for a few months as I was transitioning. I interviewed up at King TV in Seattle. Didn't get that gig, and so basically just gave up on it. Yeah, I got into financial services, stockbroker for a while, Dean Witter of downtown Portland, and then learned that besides being a retail broker, which I didn't like and wasn't very good at, there's a wholesale side of it. So I transitioned to the wholesale side, where now I'm representing a product and a territory, and I'm training the stockbrokers and the financial planners and the insurance people on the product, and I'm hosting seminars. So I'm the up guy up at the podium with a slideshow, and I've got 45 minutes to talk about whatever. And so I did that for 3 different companies over the next several years. And
Well, there's your presentation value. I mean,
exactly.
what you did in TV news and sports journalism, you were, I'm sure, very good at being a communicator in that venue.
That's how I sold myself. And yeah, I got hired by a company called J&B Realty, which is the company that owned the Clackamas Town Center at the time, big real estate stuff. And there's a seminar scheduled up in Anchorage, and the guy who was handing off that territory was up there with me to kind of show me the ropes and whatnot. And the night before, he called and said he couldn't make it up in California. He was sick. So I said, it's yours. So I had a room full of people to Sheraton up there on afternoon one, and did the slideshow, and it went well, and I got some great comments afterwards, and I was on the way. So yeah, that turned out to be a better gig for me, and a more lucrative gig too.
And somebody probably listened to your presentation and came up afterwards and said, "Have you ever considered radio?"
I've gotten some of that, yeah.
And so are you you're all done, retired, and hanging out in Arizona?
Carl, I've been retired now for 26 years.
Wow, good for you.
I quit the gig back in at the end of '94. Again, totally burned out, traveling, 6 days a week. It's going to take a year off, recharge, get back into it. The stock market was good in '95. So I had to take a second year. The stock market was good in '96. By '97, I had no marketable skills. So yeah, we've been retired for quite a while. We moved down here to Arizona in 2001. It's like a Sun City type of place. It's a place called Saddlebrook. It's 55 and over with the golf courses, tennis courts, pickleball, all that stuff. So we were here in 2001, 2012. Moved back up to Oregon to Eagle Crest, and then came back down here in 17.
Hey, good for you. I mean, 20 some years of retirement. That's awesome.
It is.
I'm hoping I can clock that much in, but but I did not. I retired
we've
today.
been very, very fortunate. As my wife says, and she's right, the keys are no kids
Okay.
and no alimony.
Very good plan.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got another career there as a financial advisor, just saying 2 things: don't have kids and don't get divorced. You're going to be okay.
You don't even need a license for that. Yeah.
Exactly. Well done. Well, we chatted a little bit. You went to the Diamondbacks. Are you still a sports fan, or what is your sports allegiance now, as far as how you view it, having been on both sides of it?
I enjoy the big events. British Open's coming up this week. I'll be wire to wire on that. The major golf tournaments. Get into the playoffs for basketball and NFL and baseball. I'm there. Regular season, not so much. I mean, down here, the Phoenix Suns are going nuts right now in the NBA. We were up there last week, and they were playing across the street from our hotel. It was crazy town to go out there and watch the fans hoop it up. But the day-to-day stuff, not so much. The big events I like.
I had an interesting conversation with a friend just a couple of days ago, where he said, we were talking about some things, and he said, he's about my age. Are you a crier? Do you get teary-eyed? And I kind of thought about it, and he told me a story about some of the things that made him emotional lately in his life. And I said, I get teary-eyed at some sporting events. I mean, I'm not a really big regular season sports fan. I will watch stuff, but I like it when underdogs achieve, and I like it when people less than the professional level and when I see people get that trophy and thank somebody after winning their first PGA tournament, whether it's the U.S. Open or the Les Schwab, whatever, I still get a little choked up and teary eyed just knowing the the work that it takes to be good at something and to really want something and to get there and all the people that help you along. That part of sports still moves me.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I love the underdog. I'll get teared up at the underdog. At age almost 69, I'll get teared up at anything. The beer commercial, I'll get a little soggy. But I'm tired of the Dodgers winning everything, or the Yankees winning everything, or the New England Patriots winning everything. Enough of that. This NBA playoff going on right now, you got Phoenix, which was the worst team in basketball 2 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Milwaukee Bucks, neither team's done anything in playoffs for 100 years. This is a good playoff. Somebody's going to be an underdog. Somebody's going to win.
Yeah. Bless my wife's heart. She puts up with a lot of stuff, but I always watch the Stanley Cup hockey playoffs because I just think it's an exciting sport. And when you see those guys raise the cup and knowing what that meant to hockey players, the junior hockey players that we covered with the Winter Hawks, that event and that award means so much to them. And when those guys lift that cup up, and again, that moves me as well. Those kind of things, because it's not. They're not the Tom Brady's of the world. They're not the LeBron James of the world. They're these guys who grind away on skates and get beat up, and all for that one title.
What was it? 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, Las Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah.
They weren't even a team, and suddenly they're in the finals. Great story. Underdog. Loved it.
Cool. Well, Bill, I'm glad our paths crossed back in the early days of sports back there at KATU and KGW, and I'm glad you're looking good and feeling well and enjoying retirement. Appreciate the time, so I can now share this with everybody who asks, whatever happened to Bill Boaz?
I don't get that much anymore.
Well, I'm glad I can share the story. So, Bill, thanks for the time, partner. And when you're back up here in Oregon, in Central Oregon, you look us up, all right?
For all good seeing. Take care of yourself.
Bye, Bill.